How's everyone doing today? Today we're looking at the four sides of the mind for the different personality types. We're going to go through all 16 personality types and look at that and what it means. If you don't know too much about the four sides of the mind, don't worry. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. It just goes into the 8 cognitive functions. If you know anything about that, it's where the letters come from, and it's just the different dispositions that people have. And when it comes to the four sides of the mind, it is an advanced concept, but it essentially entails that the different personality types, they have different orders of cognitive functions that are in their mind, and they're able to be led in different ways. And if you know too much about it, you'll see here, I can show with the mouse, you have the ego functions of an INFJ. So the first 4 functions, you have the shadow functions, which are the next from 5th to 8th, and then you have the flip inverse. So you have it led by the 4th, and you have it led by the 8th. So just the inverses of the 4 sides of the mind. So we're going to get a little bit into what that means for each personality type and how that affects their personality type and when they might be in these different dispositions. So for an INFJ, their base level ego, their 4 functions expressed normally, it really does focus on just doing the right thing, following that NIFE perspective, using very heroic choices to try and help other people feel better and do their moral justice. When they're more on their subconscious side, they're going to be a little bit more of a leader. They're leading with their SC, a little bit more of that kind of position of an ESTP, a bit more of a persuader, trying to make more pragmatic and logical decisions, leading more with TI instead of FE, and trying to help other people be healthy, be strong, be better. And so leading with that SETI perspective as well, and INFJs may be in this kind of a headspace when they're feeling more confident, when they're able to utilize the things they have practiced and put their plans into reality to actually improve other people and have that impact on other people directly. And then we have their shadow, ENFP shadow, which is more led through NENFI, for example, which is their 5th and 6th function. As we go into those bottom 4 functions, is more aware of what other people want. So instead of looking at what it wants, it's aware of what other people want, and it's able to kind of express its own feelings, not just care about others, but care about itself as well. And an INFJ may be more into these functions sometimes if they're insecure. Sometimes you can become more worried about what other people want when you feel like you're not able to get what you want. So sometimes people default to the shadow because of that. And then we have the ISTJ superego, which is the complete opposite functions for an INFJ, and it's led with SI. It's the complete opposite perspective, and it kind of reminds the ego that it has to take care of itself and look for its own happiness, look for its own needs, and not just focus on what it wants in the future, but what it needs in the moment. So it has that opposing perspective. And then we have ENFJs. ENFJs, their core ego with FENI, focuses on being really kind and implementing those structures to help other people, where their subconscious is more focused on an individual perspective. It's trying to be analytical, it's trying to be pragmatic and independent and do its own thing. And that ISTP subconscious is really focused on speaking its mind and being a little bit more focused on the truth instead of just focusing on how everyone feels. The INFP shadow is where a lot of their insecurity does come from, though. It kind of worries that it's not a good person. It worries that while it helps other people be happy, that it itself will not be happy. But when they're focused on that shadow, they're becoming more and more aware of how they feel, even if those feelings are negative. And then that ESTJ superego, that kind of nuke button they can use, kind of reminds the ego that it can't give too much and be too generous to the point where it sacrifices itself, and that people aren't able to give respect to it, and that the ENFJ should demand respect from other people. And then we have the INFP. INFPs, their ego really focuses on that FI perspective, focused on being good, being a good person, sticking to their feelings, sticking to their morals, being proud of who they are, figuring out what they identify with. But their subconscious, on the other hand, is aspiring more in the TE direction, aspiring to be more knowledgeable, focus on the truth more, focus on gaining credentials, establishing rules, gaining education, focusing on what other people think, translating their morals into the minds of others, and communicating those feelings properly so that other people understand them. Their shadow, however, is kind of a defensive mechanism, right? So it's more focus on how other people feel. It's not just focusing on its own feelings. It's trying to externalize that knowledge and figure out, okay, I'm helping other people figure out what they want with my NE parent, but I'm also going to figure out what I want for my future, even if I'm negative about it, even if it's difficult to figure out. So the shadow is a little bit more of a negative zone, subconscious is a little more of a happy zone, but that super ego is something that's very important that can nag in the mind of any personality type, and it's there to remind the ego of that opposing perspective. INFPs focus on their feelings, what they like, what they value. Well, it has to be honest as well. The ego can't just focus on things that it likes, things that it prefers. It's bias. It has to actually face the truth, the objective truth, even if it makes them feel less good about themselves, but they can become more objective because of it. And the superego holds that opposing perspective. And then we have ENFPs. ENFPs with NEFI, they really focus on influencing other people's choices, influencing other people's decisions and future, and manipulating and understanding the different potentials that can happen. And they're very focused on that, very focused on the what ifs, on the abstract, focused on the imagination side of things. But the ISTJ subconscious, for example, is more focused on the concrete steps that need to be taken. It's trying to be more healthy, have routines, have traditions, have habits that really help them kind of achieve that imagination that they have and translate that imagination into something that's very real for them. That INFJ shadow is an opposing perspective to their ego. Their ego focus on giving other people what they want, but the INFJ shadow looks at what the individual wants. It's trying to examine that and examine your own ethical choices and your own ethical decision making, and being kind of like an INFJ. The superego, on the other hand, tries to remind the ego that it has to be realistic too. Yes, it's imaginative. Yes, it can see all of these different possibilities, but it has to look at the here and now, the reality of the situation, and not just have fun imagining, but also understand what's really going on. So it tries to remind the ENFP ego of that. And then we have INTJs. INTJs, their main ego, NINTE, as their priority, focuses on making really good decisions and being strategic and trying to have a good future based on rational thought, on research, on reason, on analytical deduction, and trying to learn from other people through an extroverted perspective. Their subconscious, however, takes a slightly different approach. It focuses more on the outcome of those things, not just the plan, but the impact that it has on others. And it tries to be more performative. It tries to share its ideas with others. It tries to express itself more in an emotional way. So it has that emotional potential expression that the INTJ ego sometimes stuffs down. The ENTP shadow offers kind of an opposing perspective as well. It's kind of aware of the opposite thing. INTJs focus on their strategies for their future. The ENTP shadow focused on what other people might do. It tries to analyze other people's potential decisions, even if it's kind of a negative experience. And that ISFJ superego, it really has that very, very final perspective of an INTJ, which sees the complete opposite, not just about your future, but about your past, about your regrets, about what you're doing right now. It tries to remind the ego that, its rules have to be kind as well. It's also about that TE perspective. It's not just about your plans have to take care of yourself, but it's also like your rules you implement, your systems you implement, the efficiency. It has to be kind. It has to be ethical and not just ignore that duty. And then we have an ENTJ, and ENTJ's ego is focused on acquiring knowledge. It has that TE lead, trying to be ambitious with their NI plans and put their knowledge into place. But their ISFP subconscious has a slightly different perspective. It sees those plans, it sees that knowledge, it sees those beliefs, and it says kind of what's our emotional opinion on them, what's our principles and our perspective, and it tries to help an ENTJ be a little bit more in touch with their emotions and express them into the real world, whether that's expressing them to a friend, expressing them to another person, expressing them artistically. It's just helping them express their emotional state, which is often put secondary to the ego. The shadow, on the other hand, often comes out in a worrying perspective. It tries to analyze what could happen, what could be true. It sees the other side of the coin, not just about what other people know, what I can learn, but what do I know? What can I teach others? And the ESFJ superego sees the complete opposite perspective, and it kind of reminds the ego that it has to be kind as well, even if it's inefficient, because if you're working with other people, kindness is efficiency, and that's what the superego teaches. Then you have the INTP ego. They're focused on that TI, focused on thinking things through, being analytical, trying to analyze theories about potential futures and be very theoretical. Whereas the ESFJ subconscious is more focused on concrete social relationships, that SI and FE, trying to be empathetic for others, trying to be there for other people and connect emotionally to others. The ENTJ shadow kind of has a different perspective to the ego. The ego's focused on what it knows, but the shadow is focused on what other people know. It's focused on other people's potential thoughts, and it tries to implement an understanding of what other people might know to learn as well. The ISFP superego tries to remind the ego that it has to have an emotional valuing of things. It has to have emotional perspectives to really understand its reality and try and implement things that are good in its life. Think about things that are good. Think about things that are important. Analyze things which will have a positive impact on both yourself and other people. And then we have ENTPs. ENTPs, they're very focused on logical deduction as well. They're focused on predicting things, coming up with things, imagining things, envisioning things. But that ISFJ subconscious is more focused on the self. It's not just focused on what could happen, what you can do, what can happen here. It's focused on what am I doing right now? What are my habits? Are they healthy? Are they sustainable? Are they leaving me feeling satisfied? And am I being socially responsible in the things that I'm creating and having that social responsibility that it's not hurting anyone? And the INTJ shadow sees that other side of it too. It's not just about what could happen, but what can I do? What can I implement? And what can I affect in my life and make choices that are just for me? And try and understand that. It also tries to understand what other people think, even if it's negative about that opposing side. The ESFP superego, it reminds the ego that it has to learn to perform in real life as well and compete with other people in order to succeed. It can't just imagine and come up with things. It has to actually face that public perception. It has to face that public reality as well and have more of an SE perspective, not just focus on what can happen, but what is happening and be aware of that external world. And then we have the ISFJ ego, for example. They're very focused on what they've experienced before, trying to be healthy, avoid conflict, be as normal as possible. But that ENTP subconscious helps them think outside of the box, see different possibilities, be more independent to pursue those possibilities and try to understand different things that can happen. And that shadow, it sees another side of it as well. It's aware of other people's experiences, other people's past, and tries to analyze that so that they have a good understanding of both their experience and other people's. The INTJ superego, it kind of reminds the ego that it has to stand up for itself. It has to stand up for what it wants, pursue its own dreams, take its own risks, make its own decisions for itself, instead of just trying to play it safe and avoid conflict. The ESFJ ego, it kind of is always focused on other people's happiness, people pleasing, trying to make other people feel good about themselves. Whereas that INTP subconscious kind of looks at, what's actually true, what's literally true, and what do you think about it? It tries to be a little more honest. It tries to be a little bit more logically consistent in its analysis. That's not a word. In its analysis of things and not just focusing on people pleasing. The ISFP shadow is really focused on its own identity. The ESFJ ego is focused on making other people feel good about who they are, but the ISFP shadow tries to feel good about itself. And the ENTJ superego tries to remind the ego that it also wants to be thought highly of and not just people please, but also please itself as well. And then ISTJs, they're really focused on, what they need to be happy, to be strong, to be a good person. That SI perspective kind of combined with the FI loop. But the ENFP subconscious tries to understand how it can affect other people through its strength, through its experience, through its skill, to be more inspirational and change other people's futures and have a kind of balanced perspective on its own values. The ESTP shadow is trying to be aware of their effect on others and on making sure other people can be as strong as they are. But the INFJ superego tries to remind the ego that it has to have integrity in its decision making and be selfless and merciful with its rules it implements as well and the rules that it follows. ESTJ ego kind of wants to believe, what they think is right, what they believe is right, from what other people think. Maintain that order, maintain that tradition, maintain that structure. But the INFP subconscious wants to be a little bit more focused on its feelings, express its emotions more, and outside of its structure, maybe create, maybe imagine, maybe utilize those feelings to guide its path. Whereas the ISTP shadow is, more aware of another intellectual perspective. It's not just looking at what they believe, what they actually know to be true and trying to logically verify their beliefs. The ENFJ superego, on the other hand, tries to remind the ego that it has to be kind to other people as well in order to be happy. It has to try and contribute to others as well in order to feel fully fulfilled. And then the ISFP ego. The ISFP ego has that FISP, oh my gosh, I can't even talk. FISE perspective, right? So it's focused on what they value and what they, kind of want to do in their life. So they're very focused on other people's needs with SE. They're very focused on other people's health, trying to figure out that FI, what I value, with how can this affect other people positively. The ENTJ subconscious, it really tries to be more in charge. It tries to take that lead, focus on their research, their beliefs, what they want in their life. The ESFJ shadow is trying to see that other side of it. Yes, I know what I feel like, but how do other people might feel? How do other people feel? Excuse me. And how should I address those feelings? How should I resolve my guilt? And how should I treat other people kinder? The INTP superego kind of reminds the ego that it has to be honest with itself. It can't just live in la la land, what feels good, what feels authentic to me. It has to face some hard truths about itself as well. And then we have ESFPs. ESFPs, of course, that SE dominant perspective, are very focused on using their feelings to impact other people, always living in the moment, having fun, and showing other people things. But that INTJ subconscious is like, how are you being strategic about it? How are you being tactical? What do you really want? Yes, you're having fun, you're living in the moment, you're showing people things, but what do you want to accomplish? And the ISFJ shadow kind of mediates that with an understanding of an SI perspective of, what is my comfort level? I'm always trying to give other people good experiences, but what is it that really gives me a good experience, and how can I utilize that in my plans? And the ENTP superego trying to remind the ego that it has to be aware of the complete opposite perspective. It's not just about showing people things and giving them a good experience and telling them what to do, but it also has to understand other people's choices and the potential consequences of their actions. Then we have the ISTP ego. ISTP is very focused on that TI, very focused on what they know, very focused on what they think. Whereas the ENFJ subconscious is a bit more focused on feelings, a bit more focused on other people's emotions. It's trying to be more outgoing. It's trying to be more caring. It's trying to affect others positively. That ESTJ shadow is trying to see another side of the coin as well. It's trying to look at what other people think about things. It's trying to be aware of its own experiences as well and take care of itself. And that kind of goes into the INFP superego, which has to remind the ego that it has to live by its own values as well. It can't just stay in an analysis mode and try to, think everything through. It also has to prioritize things from a completely different side of the emotional coin. Then we have the ESTP ego. They're focused on thinking things through as well. And they're also focused on understanding what other people experience, how to impact other people with SE. But their subconscious tries to make, decisions for themselves. They're trying to pave their own path. They're not just focused on making sure everyone around them feels safe and secure, but they are also focused on what they want to do in their life. The ISTJ shadow, very aware of its own sensations, its own experience, its own health, its own needs, and it tries to focus on itself instead of just trying to make other people have a good time. The ENFP superego, that very final perspective, tries to remind the ego that it has to be flexible as well, and what it wants has to be mediated with what is possible, and look at those potential metaphysics as well instead of just focusing on reality. So that's something that kind of keeps that ego in check for an ESTP. So this is kind of the very different balances between all of these sides of the mind and how they play together. I know this was a short video. If you guys are interested in more deep analysis of the four sides of the mind, let me know for any specific type in the comments down below, and please like and subscribe as it helps the channel as well. And I hope you all have a great day.